Here are 17 cringe moments of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry red carpet edition. By the end of this, you'll be wishing you could unsee every single one. Meghan has always loved the spotlight, and nothing proves it more than what went down on the red carpet. When officials told her to step back, she wasn't having it. Harry, as the guest dignitary, was the one supposed to inspect the Guard of Honor, a serious military tradition. But instead of stepping aside like protocol required, officials had to explain over and over again why she couldn't stand next to him. It went straight in one ear and out the other. She ended up trailing Harry along the edge of the carpet, mimicking his every move like she was shadowing him in a game nobody else signed up for. It was obvious she had no idea how official state ceremonies actually work. In many countries, guards of honor are presented specifically for the guest dignitary, not their plus one. After those awkward scenes, you'd think she would have picked up on something. But Morocco? That was a whole different level. She showed up on a mission, no more waiting, no more standing behind anyone. She physically pushed ahead of Harry to shake King Mohammed VI's hand first. Her own husband she cut right in front of him to greet a king. That move set the tone for the entire trip, with Meghan leading the charge and Harry quietly trailing behind like a royal shadow. At this point,
Harry, what do you think about destroying the royal family? Meghan, you destroyed the royal family!
nobody's sure if Harry is her husband or her personal assistant. With money reportedly getting tight, Harry took matters into his own hands at the worst possible moment. At the Lion King premiere in London, he pulled Disney CEO Bob Iger aside during a receiving line and pitched Meghan's voiceover talents on the spot, asking, "Do you know she does voiceover?" Iger looked genuinely puzzled, clearly caught off guard. He responded politely, but made it known, supporting your spouse is admirable, but doing it in a receiving line is neither the best place nor the right time. Still, Iger followed through, and Meghan landed the narration for Disney's documentary, Elephant. Critics were not impressed. Her performance was widely panned, and that ended up being her last voiceover role. Things didn't get much smoother at the ESPY Awards either. As the couple made their exit, the crowd had some very unfiltered parting words. Someone could clearly be heard shouting, "You destroyed the royal family," as they walked out. Not exactly the Hollywood send-off they were hoping for. Then there was the Salute to Freedom Veteran Gala in 2021. Harry was actually thriving, chatting, connecting with people, being genuinely social. Then Meghan arrived in a gown so enormous, it probably needed its own security detail. She swooped in, grabbed Harry mid-conversation, and pulled him away, and he just followed along, like a puppy on a leash. The guy didn't even get to finish his sentence, he just went, because apparently that's the job now. Meghan's exit from the Paley Center was anything but glamorous. Instead of a grand Hollywood moment, she slipped out the back door like someone dodging an awkward situation. All smiles for the cameras.
Markle makes a funny fashion faux pas in Tonga. The Duchess of Sussex looks stunning in her red self-portrait dress and completes her bold look with Manolo Blahnik BB pumps and a Christian Dior clutch. But there's just one problem. A closer view reveals she accidentally left the tag on the bottom of her dress. Whoops. It's a rare fashion miss.
But her expensive Oscar de la Renta gown was dragging across the dirty floor of a back alley, picking up things nobody wants to think about. The internet had a field day, calling it flat out trashy. And honestly, when your designer couture is mopping up a back alley, it's hard to argue with that. Then came the ribbon-cutting ceremony for a Navy SEAL Foundation training facility, and apparently nobody told her this one wasn't about her. Meghan became visibly fixated on being front and center. She nudged Harry aside, planted herself so close to the ribbon that she completely blocked Robin King's view, forcing Robin to say out loud, "I can't see anything." She was essentially taking over someone else's moment, while Harry just stood there watching it all unfold. Now, Meghan considers herself a fashion icon, but Tonga in 2018 told a very different story. Sharp-eyed observers noticed she had walked out with the price tag still attached to the bottom of her red self-portrait dress. Her stylist somehow missed it entirely. She showed up stunning in red, rocking Manolo Blahnik pumps and a Christian Dior clutch, and still left the tag on, a crown-level fashion fumble. At the Paley Honours in 2024, Meghan latched onto Tyler Perry, the evening's awardee, soaking up every second of his spotlight. Tyler was ready to move on, but Meghan held on just long enough to squeeze out one more photo. When the crowd was directed to their seats, Tyler broke free and walked away, leaving Meghan standing alone, clapping at absolutely nothing. That awkward clapping has become her signature move whenever things get uncomfortable.
I think it's safe to say that I come from a very different background than my incredible wife. Yet our lives were brought together for a reason. We share a commitment to a life of service.
And I couldn't be prouder that we're doing this work together.
Once again, red carpet etiquette went completely out the window. At the CHLA gala, Meghan pulled CEO Paul Viviano into a red carpet photo op, and event organizers had to step in and redirect them almost immediately. At the Children's Hospital Los Angeles charity gala in October 2024, Meghan was spotted clinging to CHLA Heart Ambassador Kelly Zaffin in a way that got people talking. Observers online quickly commented on how she guided Kelly's hand into an awkward position that had everyone raising their eyebrows. You'd think after that moment she'd keep a respectable distance, but no. At another red carpet appearance with the same friend, she was right back at it, clinging, posing, draping herself all over Kelly like it was a high school yearbook shoot. Online users were fast to call it performative, with one person pointing out that, for someone who constantly preaches about authenticity, this desperate grab for attention says anything but that. Meghan is truly the queen of the grip. At the SBIs in July 2024, when Harry's name was called to receive the Pat Tillman Award, she was clutching both his hands so tightly that he literally had to shake himself free just to walk up. Meghan recovered fast, immediately jumping to her feet for a standing ovation like nothing happened. In 2022, the Sussexes accepted the NAACP President's Award for Distinguished Public Service, and the backlash was instant. NAACP Life member and activist Bishop Talbot Swan went straight to social media, stating, "I am embarrassed," and publicly questioned whether there was truly no one in
posed for photos with Jamaica's anti-royalist prime minister, the man who has said he wants to ditch the
engaged in the justice struggle for Black people in America, more deserving of the award. That's a serious statement from someone on the inside. At the Bob Marley One Love premiere in February 2024, Harry and Meghan met Jamaican Prime Minister Andrew Holness, a meeting many considered a major misstep. Holness had previously made clear that Jamaica intended to remove the king as its head of state. People questioned why Harry would put himself in that position at all. Hypocrisy doesn't even begin to cover it. And in 2022, they also accepted the RFK Ripple of Hope Award for fighting institutional racism. When people pushed back asking what exactly they had done to earn it, RFK Human Rights Foundation President Carrie Kennedy stepped up to defend the decision, claiming they had confronted one of the oldest institutions in UK history over its alleged structural racism. That award became a punchline fast. At a January 2023 ITV interview with Tom Bradby, when Bradby brought up the Oprah interview and asked whether they had accused family members of racism, Harry interrupted and said no, then turned around and blamed the British press instead. The very award they proudly accepted for confronting racism was now something Harry was distancing himself from entirely. Even the most committed spin doctor would have struggled to keep a straight face at that one. Let's rewind, because the timeline here is genuinely staggering. In 2022, the Sussexes stood on that stage, accepted that RFK Ripple of Hope Award, and let the world celebrate them as champions of racial justice. Cameras flashed, applause filled the room, and they soaked in every second of it. RFK Human Rights Foundation President Carrie Kennedy personally vouched for them, claiming they had bravely confronted one of the oldest institutions in UK history over its alleged structural racism. That was the narrative: bold, courageous, speaking truth to power. But then comes January 2023, just months later, and Harry is sitting across from Tom Bradby on ITV, acting like none of it ever happened. When Bradby referenced the Oprah interview directly and asked point blank whether they had accused family members of racism, Harry cut him off and said no, then immediately pivoted to blaming the British press. No hesitation, no clarification, just a flat-out no. Accepting an award for something and then denying you ever did that thing is a level of contradiction that is genuinely hard to process. And here's the thing: the Oprah interview was watched by millions of people around the world. It wasn't some obscure clip buried on the internet. People saw it with their own eyes, heard the words with their own ears, and then watched Harry sit in that ITV chair acting like it never went down the way everyone remembers. The internet did not let it slide for even 1 second. Clips were pulled, side-by-side comparisons were posted, and people were absolutely floored by the denial on display. Someone online summed it up perfectly, saying it felt like watching someone set a building on fire and then show up to the press conference asking who could have possibly done such a thing. The British press, which Harry blamed in that interview, had been a target of his frustration for years, and look, the relationship between the royals and the tabloids has always been complicated and messy. But deflecting an entire controversy about race accusations onto journalists, while simultaneously holding an award that exists because of those very accusations, was a move that left even his most loyal supporters scratching their heads. It raised a very simple but very loud question: if there was no racism accusation, what exactly was the award for? This is the pattern that keeps repeating with the Sussexes, and people are starting to connect the dots in a very big way. Say something dramatic, collect the rewards, then quietly walk it back when the heat gets too intense, rinse and repeat. And every single time, the contradiction gets more obvious and harder to ignore. Then Harry showed up in Nigeria, and apparently nobody told him, or he simply chose to forget, that he is no longer a working royal. He was welcomed with a full guard of honor, the kind of formal ceremony normally reserved for actual heads of state and official dignitaries. Not someone who voluntarily packed his bags, relocated to California, and walked away from the firm. He gave up his working royal status, lost his military titles, but clearly never lost his appetite for the treatment that came with them. The audacity was loud, and people online were not shy about calling it out. But let's really sit with the Nigeria situation for a moment, because it deserves more than just a passing mention. The visit in May 2024 was framed publicly as a private trip centered around the Invictus Games and raising awareness about mental health. Noble enough on the surface. But what unfolded looked nothing like a private visit from a private citizen. From the moment Harry and Meghan touched down, the reception they received had the full energy of a state visit military pageantry, formal welcomes, official escorts, the works. The guard of honor that greeted Harry was a serious ceremonial gesture, the kind that carries real diplomatic weight. And Harry stood there and accepted it all, chest out, soaking in every bit of it, like he had never handed back a single title or stepped away from a single duty. Nigerian officials and commentators were divided on the visit. Some welcomed the attention it brought to the country. Others were visibly uncomfortable with the optics of a man who no longer holds any official royal position being treated like an active representative of the crown. Because here is the uncomfortable truth. Harry cannot have it both ways. He cannot walk away from the institution, strip himself of working royal duties, relocate to another continent, and then show up in foreign countries, expecting the full ceremonial treatment that comes with being an active senior royal. That is not how any of this works, and deep down, everyone in that room knew it. What made it even more eyebrow-raising was the timing. Harry and Meghan had spent years publicly distancing themselves from the monarchy, speaking out against its traditions, its structures, and, in the eyes of many, its people. And yet, the moment there was a camera and a ceremony and an opportunity to look important, there they were, front and center, lapping it up. The hypocrisy was not subtle. It was a full production. Back home in the UK and across the Commonwealth, reaction was swift and sharp. Royal commentators pointed out that the Nigerian military does not hand out guards of honor casually. It is a deliberate, formal gesture with real meaning attached to it. For Harry to receive one without holding any active royal or diplomatic role raised genuine questions about what message was being sent and to whom. Was this Nigeria making a political statement? Was it Harry leveraging whatever residual royal identity still clung to his name for personal gain? People had theories, and none of them were particularly flattering. And Meghan, of course, was right there beside him, dressed impeccably, waving warmly, playing the role of global ambassador with practiced ease. The couple visited a military school, met with wounded veterans, attended cultural events, and generally conducted themselves in a way that looked, felt, and smelled exactly like an official royal tour, just without the actual authorization that would make it one. Critics were relentless, pointing out that the Invictus Games branding was being used as a kind of diplomatic passport, giving the visit a veneer of legitimacy, while allowing the Sussexes to operate in spaces typically reserved for people with actual governmental standing. The veterans community, which Harry has always been deeply connected to and genuinely passionate about, had a mixed reaction. Many respected his commitment to wounded service members and acknowledged that his advocacy through Invictus has made a real difference. But others felt uncomfortable watching him accept military honors in a country he had no official relationship with, using a ceremony that felt more like a photo opportunity than a genuine diplomatic engagement. One commentator put it bluntly, saying it looked like Harry was cosplaying as a royal, and that description spread across social media like wildfire. What really set people off was the contrast. Here is a man who publicly walked away from royal life, who sat on a global stage with Oprah and laid out a very specific list of grievances about what the institution had done to him and his family. He described feeling trapped, feeling unsupported, feeling like the system had failed him. He made it very clear that leaving was not just a personal choice but a necessary one for his survival and well-being. People respected that, even if they disagreed with how it was handled. But then to turn around and chase the ceremonies, the titles in all but name, the diplomatic receptions, it sends a very confusing message about what Harry actually wants. Does he want freedom from the institution, or does he want the benefits without the responsibilities? Because from the outside looking in, it increasingly looks like the latter. And that tension, that contradiction at the very core of the Sussex brand is what keeps people endlessly frustrated and endlessly fascinated at the same time. You cannot keep writing the "we escaped the palace's" story while simultaneously showing up to every ceremony that still treats you like you live there. It is also worth noting that the Nigeria trip happened at a particularly sensitive time in the relationship between Harry and the royal family. King Charles had been dealing with serious health challenges, and the palace was navigating an incredibly difficult period with grace and dignity largely out of the public eye. Meanwhile, Harry was across the world accepting military ceremonies and generating headlines that pulled focus in a direction that many felt was neither helpful nor appropriate given the circumstances. The timing, as always with the Sussexes, felt less like coincidence and more like strategy. When the rest of the family was keeping things quiet and holding it together behind closed doors, Harry and Meghan were halfway across the globe collecting ceremonies like souvenirs. And then there is the broader question that hangs over everything the Sussexes do on the world stage. What exactly is their mission? They left the royal family citing a desire for privacy and a normal life. They moved to California, signed massive deals with Netflix and Spotify, launched a production company, gave the Oprah interview, published a memoir, started a podcast, attended galas, walked red carpets, accepted awards, and traveled the world on what looked very much like a shadow royal tour. At what point does the story of "we just want a quiet life" become impossible to say with a straight face? Because from where most people are sitting, that ship sailed a long time ago. The Nigeria visit crystallized something for a lot of people who had been giving the Sussexes the benefit of the doubt. It was a moment that forced even sympathetic observers to ask hard questions about authenticity, about intention, and about the gap between what Harry and Meghan say they want and what they actually pursue when the cameras are rolling. It stopped being about whether you were a fan or a critic. It became about something much more basic. It became about whether the story they were telling the world actually matched the life they were living. And for a growing number of people, the answer to that question was becoming very clear. Because here is the raw truth: if Harry truly wanted to leave royal life behind and build something new and independent, that is entirely his right and many people would genuinely respect it. Building something from scratch, creating a legacy outside of the crown, proving that you can stand on your own 2 feet, that is actually an admirable thing to do. But you do not get to leave and then keep cashing in on the very identity you claimed was harming you. You do not get to criticize the institution from the outside while sneaking back in through the side door whenever there is a ceremony, an award, or a spotlight waiting on the other side. That is not freedom, that is just a longer leash. And the more it happens, the harder it becomes to take the original exit story seriously. What makes it even more complicated is the way the Sussex narrative has shifted over time. In the beginning, the story was about escape, about 2 people choosing love and mental health over duty and tradition. And there was a real audience for that story. People genuinely connected with the idea of breaking free from a suffocating system, of choosing yourself over an institution that no longer served you. That framing worked because it felt human and relatable, but somewhere along the way, the story started to crack. The Netflix deals, the Spotify podcast, the memoir, the endless awards circuit, none of it screamed quiet, private life. It screamed brand building. And once people started seeing it through that lens, everything that came before it started looking a little different too. The Nigerian Guard of Honor moment became one of the most talked about images of their entire post-royal journey, not because it was scandalous in an obvious way, but because it was so perfectly symbolic of the central contradiction the Sussexes have never been able to resolve. They want out, but they want the trimmings that come with being in. They want privacy, but they want the platform. They want independence, but they want the prestige. They want to be seen as regular people, but they keep showing up to events that treat them like royalty and they never once turn it down. And every time that contradiction shows up on camera, which it does, regularly, reliably, almost like clockwork, the internet notices, the commentators pounce, and the cycle starts all over again. Social media has played a massive role in keeping this contradiction alive and in front of people's faces. Every ceremony, every red carpet, every award acceptance gets dissected frame by frame. Clips get pulled, comparisons get made, and the inconsistencies get catalogued in real time by millions of people who have been paying very close attention. The Sussex camp has never really found a way to get ahead of this, and the Nigeria trip is a perfect example of why. Whatever the original intention was, whatever message they hoped to send, the image that landed was of a man who gave up his crown, but could not give up the lifestyle that came with it. There is also the matter of the people around them, the advisors, the PR teams, the inner circle that presumably signs off on these decisions. Because somebody looked at the Nigeria trip itinerary, saw the Guard of Honor on the schedule, and said, yes, this is fine, let's do it. Somebody looked at a man who had publicly surrendered his working royal status and decided that a full military ceremony in a foreign country was a perfectly normal thing for him to participate in. Either the people around Harry and Meghan have completely lost touch with how this looks from the outside, or they simply do not care, and neither option is particularly reassuring. The Invictus Games, which Harry genuinely built from the ground up and which has done incredible work for wounded veterans around the world, keeps getting pulled into these optics conversations in a way that does the charity no favors. It is a legitimate, impactful organization that deserves to be talked about on its own terms. But when it gets used as the justification for trips that look and feel like unofficial royal tours, it starts to blur the lines between genuine advocacy and personal brand maintenance. And that is a distinction that matters both for the reputation of the games and for the credibility of everything Harry claims to stand for. The people who have followed this story from the very beginning, from the early days of the relationship, through the wedding, through the royal tours, through the Megxit announcement, through the Oprah interview and everything that came after, have watched a narrative go through more twists and turns than most people experience in a lifetime. And through all of it, the one thing that has remained constant is the contradiction, the gap between the words and the actions, the space between the story being told and the reality being lived. That gap has not closed. If anything, it has gotten wider, and Nigeria put it on full display for the entire world to see. From the red carpet missteps to the ribbon-cutting chaos, from the award acceptance speeches to the denial interviews, from the clinging and the posturing to the guards of honor in foreign countries, it all tells one very consistent story. A story about two people who want to rewrite the rules but keep playing by the ones they claim to have left behind. A story about a brand built on authenticity that keeps getting caught being anything but. A story that the world cannot stop watching, not because it is inspiring, but because the contradictions keep coming, and nobody has figured out how to stop them yet. And that story is not the one Harry and Meghan have been trying to write for themselves, but it is absolutely the one that keeps writing itself. There you have it, 17 of the most jaw-dropping, cringe-worthy moments from Harry and Meghan's red carpet era, and everything that came after. Every single one more unbelievable than the last. Now we want to hear from you. Which moment had you shaking your head the hardest? And did we miss any? Drop it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, smash that like button, share this with someone who absolutely needs to see it, and hit subscribe so you never miss what we drop next, because trust us, there is always more where this came from. See you in the next one.